From this year's trends in germination, vigor, and fungal infections to what growers can expect to see and start thinking about as we head into 2026, we've got a lot of juicy topics you won't want to miss. Welcome to another episode of LabLink, the podcast that helps you learn while you grow. Today, we're welcoming back Sarah Foster, president of 2020 Seed Labs. If you've been following along since our premiere, you'll remember Sarah's incredible story, how she built 2020 Seed Labs into a leader in diagnostics and innovation while keeping that down-to-earth connection with growers across Canada. Sarah, welcome back to LabLink.
Good morning, Tanya. It's great to be here. Thank you.
So we are diving straight into the deep end today, Sarah. Harvest has been full tilt across the prairies, and I imagine the lab has just been absolutely buzzing and swamped. What are you and your staff seeing in terms of, germination, vigor, fungal infections this year, and how does that compare to last season?
Well, you're right, Tanya. It's been an extremely busy season this year with samples in the past 2 months, as harvest was really good, I think, this year. Not anywhere near as challenging as previous years. This year, the seed quality is so much better and germinations are good, which is very different from last year. We had moisture all at the wrong time. We had drought conditions across many parts of the prairies last year, which led to low seed quality, subpar seed quality, low seed weights, that type of thing. And this year it's very, very different. Germinations are excellent. Vigors are following along nicely and keeping in step with most of the germinations. But Vigour has always been an important tool because it measures the sensitive index of what's actually really happening with the entire seed lot.
And did I hear a rumor that, and I think I even saw it on social media, there was like 100% germination result in the lab?
Yeah. We've had more 100% germinations this year than I can remember in a long time. So people are going to be very, very happy with that. And the great news about that is that, generally speaking, Vigour will follow suit, and we'd like to see Vigour results within 5% of that 100%. So obviously looking for 95%. But yes, in everything, oats, which is very unusual to get high results like that, wheat, barley, and rye as well. So yes, we're getting off to a really good start.
2025 has just been amazing compared to last year, it seems. And kudos to whoever got 100%. According to Moses Palmer, who we had on last episode, that is an A+ report card for germination. Now, Sarah, you mentioned the sensitive index for Vigour. Can you explain what that means for growers?
Yes. So the sensitive index can be explained in a couple of ways. It's more about putting seed into cold conditions of 5 degrees, which is the usual Vigour test that we have, or even 2 degrees. There are growers now that are looking to seed ultra early. So when you put seed into a situation that's going to create stress, it makes it more sensitive, obviously, to issues. And if you think of it in the germination, it's the exact opposite. It's warm conditions, optimum conditions that are going to allow any seed to grow. So even if the seed isn't that strong, it will grow, but it doesn't necessarily have all the essential structures that it needs if it encounters poor growing conditions in the spring. So a Vigour test is designed to emulate what happens in poor growing conditions in the spring. So wet, cold, that type of thing. So sensitive is what we're actually doing to it, and also the way that we analyze it. We are looking for structures that are important for growth, and if they can pull through in a cold condition, then it's considered vigorous.
And I think, again, Moses mentioned about ability versus performance, right? So the germination is really what's the potential for the seed, and then the vigor is how it's actually going to perform in the climate it's likely to be in, right? So very, very important. And I love that how you just explained the sensitive index. I feel that's important for growers. Getting on to the diagnostics side of things, I love anything that comes in threes. Like, give me the 3 steps. Is there a 3-step process to diagnostics?
Well, in early harvest, like after harvest, we want to find out where that seed is sitting. What's the quality as it's come off the field? Step 1, germination. Step 2, vigor. Step 3, fungal screen. Those are, I consider, to be the most critical tests that you need to do before you go into storage. So we always recommend that as a package. And of course, when we're starting in with the germination, if we see issues, we're going to find things like frost damage, chemical damage, mechanical damage, the presence of fungal pathogens, and anything else really. So when we follow up with a vigor, we see, well, how much impact have those symptoms had on the overall quality? And then, of course, if there is fungal infection, we need to be looking for that at the same time.
So if we're looking for what I might call the complete health profile of the seed, germination, vigor, and fungal identification are really if the seed went to the doctor, that's the test that it needs to run.
Absolutely. It is a prescription, and we rarely, go away from that. As I say, those are the 3 most critical tests. And of course, it varies regionally. I mean, some areas there hasn't been any, problem with disease this year. They didn't get rain or anything that would, create pathogens on the seed. So, step 1 and step 2, step 3s, they're just as a backup, basically, just in case. But when you are trying to establish overall basis, if you like, for seed going into the bin, those 3 tests are so important.
And I imagine that those 3 tests are all part of being proactive, because unlike this year, not everyone gets 100% for germination, and with a vigor being within 5%, sometimes the results aren't that great, and you've got some decisions to make to move forward, especially going into storage, right? What kind of issues will testing right after harvest reveal in order for growers to be proactive?
It's really interesting when you look at a germination test and how that seed is performing. It's like reading a book. You can see what's happened to that seed, whether it's, as we've been saying, about the presence of fungal pathogens, but you can also see things like hail and premature sprouting, early signs of frost, and mechanical damage. Well, you can get mechanical damage actually in the field, and you can also get it after it's been harvested too. But so important to get some idea of how that lot has been affected, number 1. And 2, are those issues, such as frost, for example, going to be a problem later on? So you have to, in terms of being proactive, it's knowing the complete diagnostic profile, like what is wrong with this, if anything, and what are we going to do with it? Will it actually be safe in storage? And then if there are issues, so I would always say 85%, which is the minimum germination that we need for grade, is actually quite low. Growers are looking for something much, much higher. When you get an 85%, the chances of the vigor being strong are quite hard to attain. So knowing what numbers you have, so let's go back to this 100%. Well, that would pretty much say, well, I've got no issues at all. But funnily enough, because of the way that we analyze the germination, there might be 5 or 10% that aren't quite as strong, but they've still made it to the end. They've demonstrated that they are capable of reaching that maximum potential, which is what we always try to achieve in a germination test. But that 5 or 10% in a Vigour will show up very clearly and tell you that that seed is going to drop off. So when you start to test again in the mid-season, which is sort of late February, just to check in, you might have a germ that could have dropped. That 100% needs to have a Vigour that's very, very close to that number, and you really don't want to have any pathogens. Then you've got a perfect textbook situation. That seed is going to store very well.
Now, what you just said, I know curiosity killed the cat, but I have to ask, have you had 100% Vigour results?
We have, yeah. We don't get it very often, but we have had it. And of course, if you score like that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with your seed. You have had perfect growing conditions, perfect harvest conditions, and no mechanical intervention.
And you're going to sleep really, really well until it's planting time.
Yeah.
Amazing. So you talked a lot about being proactive, and I want to get back to that because, this time of year, growers and agronomists are thinking about protecting seed value and trying to make the best decisions before winter. What should they be doing after harvest?
Well, I think the first thing is looking at the 3 checkpoints that we've kind of addressed already. And that's being right after harvest. So test the seed for germination, Vigour, and fungal screen. And that gives you the benchmark on what the quality's like for going into storage. If the quality's good, you're not going to have any issues throughout the next 6 months before planting. But it's always a good idea to check in again mid-storage, which is generally around the end of February. And this is when you want to have made sure that if there was any fungal infection, it's not caused any issues, particularly with the Vigour. Vigour, being that sensitive index, will change. So important to know, has it changed and how much has it changed? And if there are fungal pathogens present, which would have been detected in the first test right after harvest, what do we need to treat with? And are we going to treat? And in fact, where am I at? Where am I sitting in terms of quality? Am I even going to use this seed? And then again, we want to be looking pre-seeding. And that's right before seeding, maybe a month, 6 weeks before seeding, because we have to offer a germination and a Vigour that's exactly what it's going to be at time of seeding. Today, growers are early adopters of new technology, precise placement of seed weights to be able to set seeding rates are very important. So that 1,000 kernel weight now with either your germination or your Vigour. And I tend to think that using your Vigour result with a seeding rate is better than using a germination rate. You're going to get closer to actual emergence. And those are the 3 tips or points that I would follow. Absolutely. Very important to follow 3 steps throughout the winter.
I love how you've broken it down into those, 3 main checkpoints right after harvest, mid-storage, and pre-seeding. So growers, definitely need to look at those 3 checkpoints to make sure that, hey, they can have a good night's sleep between now and planting in 2026.
And the way, seed is this year, the quality's good. I'm sure as long as we can get some of that seed sold, prices are good. people should be having some good sleeps. I certainly hope so. They deserve it. We've had some pretty rough years up until this year.
Now, speaking of up until this year, if we compare last fall's data, so through November 2024, with the samples that you've been seeing September, October of this year, are there any trends or predictions you can make that you can give us a little sneak peek to?
Well, overall, across the prairies, the quality has been good. There are pockets where there's been hail, there's been some disease pressure. That's all environmental. That's all come from field growing conditions. Those areas we watch quite closely because we are seeing trends. The germs are around 85. I mean, that's okay, but it's not great. Growers want something much better than that. So, nothing necessarily trending, but as usual, there are regionalities to, what we're seeing. And, I know what they are. I spend a lot of time doing germination tests. And so I can, easily sort of pick out where there's been problems with environment and growing conditions. So it's keep a watch. But overall, we're so much better off than we were last year. I think, it seems like we're coming off this 7-year cycle finally. And really, again, just go back to thinking about definitely checking in again at the end of February for that mid-storage check, because you don't want to be caught off with any surprises. And if you need to be sourcing new seed for whatever reason, that's when you need to be doing. That's when you need to know that you could potentially have a problem.
Because I guess post-planting would probably be the worst possible time to figure out that, there was something wrong here.
Oh, yeah. We hear of that now and again when something's really gone off the rails. And generally that's, been drought. And that actually brings me to another point. Today, the Vigour test has become so important because growers are looking to get in early to catch the moisture. So, if we're going to have anything that doesn't perform, it's going to be because of lack of moisture, obviously.
Now, speaking of problems, let's talk fungal infections. What is showing up so far through 2025 up until November now? And what should growers be watching for?
Through the germination test that I've been doing, which when I see these symptoms, these fungal pathogens, whether it's fusarium or root rot, those are the two most common that we see. They affect the quality of the seed. And again, different pockets throughout different regions have had those issues. The fusarium tests that are coming back from our disease diagnosticians out of Trevor's lab, they've been single digits. There hasn't been anything too problematic, and Fusarium graminearum is not on the Pest Control Act anymore. We do monitor it. We have maps that follow the ebb and flow every year of where we're picking it up. We can treat for it. That's not a problem. And then the root rot too. Root rot's not a good one, and that is fairly common this year in some crops and some regions. So be on the watch for that. And then there is the fungal screen, and that looks at all of the different pathogens that we want to be aware of going into storage. And that is, again, another prescription that allows you to purchase the right medication, that being the seed treatment, to basically take care of that.
What are you seeing with the pulse crops?
Overall, the pulses this year have been much better with germination. Some ascochyta and a little bit of root rot, but actually quite good. Not really any problem areas that I've seen.
So, Sarah, you've kind of gone over cereals, but what are you saying with the peas?
With the peas, and we can classify them as pulses, so that's things like faba bean and soya bean, chickpeas, lentils, that type of thing. Uh, for the most part, the germs have been good without too much fungal infection, but the usual bad guys are Alternaria, especially if it's affecting the germination. And then that's always a good indication that you need to follow up with the fungal screen for those as well. But overall, I would always recommend a fungal screen for any crop type that you're testing, because seed is moving across borders, both in Canada and through the United States. We buy seed from other countries, and it's important to either get the seed tested on the plate, or more importantly, get it done with the DNA, because DNA will pick up the small spores that cause those pathogens and give you early warning. So it's always good to know what's going on in the background, because you don't want to run into issues later, because fungal issues do become a problem in storage.
So, Sarah, I love it when, yeah, in the podcast, we can leave listeners with sort of a few practical takeaways. And if we thought about, a prescription for success, what is that? What is the grower's prescription for success when it comes to testing?
Well, I think the first thing is test early, which is really being proactive. Don't wait until the spring to find out you've got a problem. And the other is get a complete health profile. That's putting the germination, the vigor, the fungal screen, and the 1,000 kernel weight all together. So you've got a neat package. It gives you the complete picture. And, thinking along that line, some growers like to support different laboratories. So they'll use one lab for germination and purity, and they'll use our lab for some of the high profile testing. So things like the wheat midge testing, the varietal blend testing. And it's starting to come to light that we really need to have our eyes on the germination and the purity. These are blends that are put together to protect the SM1 gene. So there's a certain amount of refuge in the sample that allows that wheat midge to eat that effectively, if you like, or it's a deterrent against going after the main tolerant variety. But sometimes we're starting to pick up issues on other things that I think growers may or may not be aware of. And this is where I think we would like to see those tests all sent together. Can totally appreciate wanting to support somebody as well, but it doesn't make sense to split it that way, because those labs are not experienced enough on this type of testing. And then the other is obviously use your data. When you're testing through mid-season, you want to make sure that those numbers are not moving. And if they are, particularly with your Vigour test, why are they moving? What's happening? Is it something in storage? Or was it a frost issue earlier on, or a mechanical issue earlier on that's causing problems with the seed now? So if there's fungal and mechanical, the fungal pathogens love to get into those cracks in the seed and start to eat away at that. Keep an eye on your data, particularly mid-term, and then hopefully avoid a lot of issues, whether the seed is excellent in that 100% range or not, by storing wisely and having it cool and dry, aerated, doing everything you can to preserve the quality. And that's in a bin, in bags, whatever it is. And I mean, that the high value seed nowadays is going into refrigerated warehouses. So we're putting a lot of effort into storing seed over the season before planting. So if you've got that option, use it.
And I mean, it sounds like, and this is based on, the whole first 3 episodes of the podcast, growers spend considerable resources setting themselves up for success and setting their seed up for success. But the only way they can really get the ROI from that, the return on investment, is to do all this testing and get that complete health profile of their seed so that they can make the best decisions and maximize those resources that they've invested, whether it's refrigerated storage or what have you. It's really important that they have that data as ammunition against the war on climate and the war on pathogens and the whatever battles they're facing in the future.
In terms of really getting down to what that seed is going to do and how it's going to perform, no one can do without putting it through the rigors of testing. And that's so important. And I just feel like we're a really important piece in the part of the jigsaw puzzle in terms of putting it together. And, I always caution people, and growers don't do this. It's not growers that skip out on any testing. In fact, we have more conversations with growers than anybody else and got good relationships, and we're always looking at what it is that they're looking for. In fact, we design a lot of our tests around what it is that they need. So, we're not just there to test. We are there to advise, offer solutions, and that's also for agronomists as well. We're a big piece in this puzzle. So obviously don't go out and plant that seed without knowing what you've got before you start.
Sarah, there is something I really wanted to ask. I read an article, actually by one of your staff members at 2020, Alex Playton, and he mentioned that growers need to be asking the lab, the hard questions about testing. I remember thinking to myself, with all the accreditations and standards, are all labs the same? And then, it's just a matter of pricing or geographical location, or does each lab do things differently? So like, what are your thoughts on that?
So are all labs the same with accreditations? No. For a lab to get into seed testing in Canada, they need the basic Canadian Food Inspection Agency accreditation. That allows them to do germination, purity, and smut. And one of the things that we've done is that we've looked at accreditations that can not only help us improve with procedure, but can also help us with costs and efficiencies and accuracy. So we've gone with a couple of the different international standard organization accreditations that look at service and quality. And then with the other accreditation, it's all around where are we sourcing our chemicals, how are we using them. And this is a particularly important piece when we work in molecular. Very, very sensitive testing done there. Is it regionality or price sensitivity? There's absolutely always price sensitivity. And I think something that people have to recognize is that not all labs can charge the same, unfortunately. Germination tests are not always going to be done exactly the same way in every lab, and neither are Vigour. As long as we are producing results that are within the guidelines of the methods and procedures, which is the Canadian methods and procedures, you can do a test with two or three different types of substrates, and they're all going to be different price wise. But I think one of the things that we run into is that we've got 4 labs across Canada that are offering just about everything today that growers need to put the full picture together. and they are carrying the highest costs in accreditation, in overhead and equipment. And they have made significant investments, both financially and with people, in order to do this, because Canada is definitely falling behind in what that they can offer in terms of tests. We're losing people and testing to the States. And those labs in Canada now that have basically picked up the slack and are starting to look at doing this testing, and if they're not already in this testing, as I say, have made significant investments. And we cannot always be the cheapest. We want to be here for a long time. We want to be here to answer those tough questions for customers. The standardization, yes, it's there with testing, but one of the things that really frustrates me more than anything is that we have not, as a scientific community in Canada, addressed the issue around Vigour testing. The results that our clients get, and I'm not talking about my clients, but our clients in Canada get, leave them confused. They think they order a Vigour test and they're getting exactly the same as what they're going to get from another lab. They're not. A lab that knows what they're doing in terms of Vigour testing asks the customer where they're growing, when they expect to seed, how they expect to seed. We're dealing today with tough climate conditions, growers who want to get in early, seed that's very expensive, chemicals that are very expensive. We don't want to make any mistakes. So we're going to tell you if something's not performing, that being the cold, hard truth. And nobody wants those bad answers, bad news. Nobody does, but we'll work with you. And we can always make adjustments. Adjustments can be made in terms of seeding rates and that type of thing, and seed treatments. But the frustration is that we need to have some standardization or even accreditation around some of the tests that are being performed, one being Vigour, the other being Fusarium. Any of our pathogens that are being tested, we've got guidelines, but not everybody follows them. And it's not good for the end user, and it's certainly not good for business, anybody in business, if you're not doing something correctly.
So I guess until Canada's ag sector has like a level 1 Vigour accreditation, a level 2 or a level 3, to reflect the advancement of testing that lab offers, I guess until we have that something, it's up to growers to really ask the questions before they use that lab.
So absolutely.
What kind of questions would that be? Like, what do they need to be asking to make sure that they are using what would be the equivalent of a level 3 Vigour test lab? What kind of questions do they need to be asking?
Well, I think they need to ask, what method are you using and how's that going to perform on my farm? And when you at least have that information, you can curtail it with the right tests for that particular situation. And there are tests that are out there that work very well across the prairies. I mean, we've been in business for over 30 years. There's been history and data built around that. And it's been specifically designed to emulate early, cold, spring, wet conditions. As I say, there's a new wave now of growers that are thinking about seeding ultra early, and that can be from 0 to 2 degrees. Very, very cold. So you've got to make sure that your seed is in top condition if you're planning on doing that. So there are rules with the International Seed Testing Association and with the Association of Official Seed Analysts out of the States for Vigour. They've got methods that they will recommend. They can work here in Canada, no two ways about it. They're fine. But does the grower know that? And because he's ordering a Vigour, he can get served up a Vigour that's not necessarily going to work for him. And it may look good on paper, but it's not going to perform in the harsh realities of cool, cold spring conditions, which is what we're working with here in Canada. You can't wait until the soil warms up to 20 degrees.
And they definitely, at least it sounds based on what you're saying, that they definitely want to choose a lab that's not afraid to share results that are not good. To have those difficult conversations. Results are not always going to be those 100% that, we've kind of seen a little bit this year. Can you give us some insight into, how 2020 is not afraid to give those bad results, but from also a perspective of, yes, these results are bad, but here we're going to work with you, on some course correcting. Can you talk to us about 2020's process with that?
Well, when we have results that fall below the grade minimum, it's an automatic message to the client, and then it's followed up with a phone call. And we have triggers, if you like, on all tests that fall below minimum. And that way, we can offer solutions. It's not a shock to the grower or any customer when they get some result that's off the mark, and they're not expecting. And, we've come under fire over the years for maybe, being that lab that's taken the high road, had to. Like, there's liability on both sides. There's liability on us and there's liability on whoever's using the seed. So, we're here to protect you. We don't want you to run into issues down the road, particularly if you're selling seed to somebody else. You don't want that not to perform. That's major headaches for everybody. So, no, we're not afraid to give the hard truth, and nobody likes to do that. But we're always there right away as soon as that problem, or if there is a problem, we're right there. We don't allow anything to go out without double checking, making sure all our control samples were in compliance, everything was working, because so much else can go wrong too. It doesn't necessarily have to be the seed. It could be something that's gone wrong in the lab, but we've got so many checks in place. If that happens and there is a problem, we're alerted almost right away. So we wouldn't release it if we thought it was the problem on our end too.
It's a great approach to have and I hope, listeners have kind of gotten the hint through the first 3 episodes of this one, that you're not afraid of the truth. You're not afraid to share, the goods, the bads, the uglies, and all the things in between, whether it's testing, diseases, the industry. So hopefully they've kind of learned that, especially Sarah Foster, not afraid of the cold hard truth at all.
No. School of Hard Knocks.
Sarah, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and time during what I know is an incredibly busy season. Thanks so much for being our guest again today.
Thank you, Tanya. It's always great. Thanks for your time too. Really appreciate it.
And thank you to our listeners for tuning into this episode of LabLink. If there is a topic you would like us to cover next or in the future, drop us a note through the website at 2020seedlabs.ca or any of our social media channels. And if you want to be the first to know about future episodes, you just need to hit that subscribe button on YouTube or follow us on Spotify. Until next time, never stop growing.